In a moment like this, I think the readings today are all that much more appropriate. Whether it was our first reading where the prophet Samuel is sent to anoint the next king of Israel, and God says to Samuel, when Samuel sees the first son of Eliab, and God says, no, he's not the one I've chosen, because the vision, the sight that humans have is not the way that God sees things. Humans see superficially, God sees into the heart. The second reading, St. Paul challenges us that by saying, we once walked in darkness and now we see the light of Jesus Christ. So don't live anymore as if you're still in the darkness, but live rather as if your life has been changed by the light of Christ. Now, in our gospel reading, we see this great dramatic story that John tells of a blind man who has been blind since birth. And how the working of this miracle, the giving of sight to this man, is seen more than just a physical healing, but it's a spiritual one as well. Because the idea of blindness and sight has become in this story more than just a physical reality, but a spiritual one as well. Those who see and understand who Jesus is, what he's doing, they're the ones who see. Those who, even though they may be able to physically see, choose not to believe in Jesus, choose to reject what he's telling us, they are those who are seen as blind. Okay. What are we supposed to do with all that today? It's a very, very strange thing. It's a strange moment in which we find ourselves when our gathering together is you looking at a screen and me looking at a camera. But however unique of a moment this is, I do believe we are united. We are united in Jesus Christ because we have gathered to pray together. Certainly, being physically together would be better, but so as to stay healthy, we are only together electronically. I'd like to challenge you this morning. In fact, I'd like to challenge the whole world. Sometimes when I preach, I get a little audacious, so let's go there. You see, I believe our society suffers from a type of blindness. I believe that the world in which you and I were raised, even though I'm so old, has been burdened by a type of blindness. We do not see the world as Jesus sees the world. This is what I mean. The device that's recording me right now has been marketed to us for over 10 years as an iPhone. Our world is obsessed with I and me. When I was younger, the military marketed to my generation saying, show up and volunteer. You can be an army of one. Be all that you can be. Every marketing message tells us you do you or have it your way. Every message that we've ever heard growing up reinforces this cultural expectation that we are individuals. And the buried message in this notion of individualism, hyper-individualism, is that your life and my life really has no effect on other people's lives, unless we want it to. If we choose to include someone, then our lives affects them. But if not, we have barely ever considered in what ways our lives affect others or other people's lives affect us. But now, that luxury, that blindness is gone. And dear God, I hope it stays gone. I hope we stay being able to see, because the tragedy of this moment also brings sobering wisdom. Think of it this way. People you have never met in a place you may have never heard of got sick, and within days, the rest of the world was ill. Our world is so interconnected. Our lives and our society is so interconnected that it actually makes a difference. Your life and my life really is connected to other people. This notion of hyper-individualism of you do you and I'll do me, and whatever is fine for you is fine for you, and whatever's good for me is good for me, and have it your way and I can have it my way, and we don't interact if we don't want to, is a lie. It's a type of blindness. We have failed to see that our lives are connected with one another, and in so wallowing in blindness, our world is falling apart. It's not just over one virus called COVID-19, but much more drastically and much more hidden, the plight of the poor, those who suffer injustice and prejudice, racism, marginalization, those who in lands far away, people we've never met, who we very easily disregard or don't think of, their lives are burdened and suffering because of our blindness. Because up to this point, we were contented with the idea that our lives had nothing to do with theirs. And their lives had nothing to do with ours. But see, when Jesus calls us to see, every time he challenges our morality, every time he proposes some ethical instruction, he always takes our attention off ourselves and directs it to someone else. Think about that incredible story. The apostles were arguing amongst themselves. Who was better? Who was more important? Who was greater? And when they get to the house, Peter's house, Jesus gathers everyone around and he calls a small child and he places a child in front of them and he says, if you wish to be great, you have to become like this child. The immediate response is stop looking at yourself, stop being focused on your own individuality and see another. If you want to see the world correctly, don't look in the mirror, look outside. See someone else. The very heart and soul of our faith is this idea that you and I, in spite of the blindness of our world that tells us that we are unique, unrepeatable, and more unlike everyone else than we are. We are so vastly unique and individualistic that you're not like anyone else. Well, I'm sorry. The lie is over. The blindness is gone. We see you are not that unique. I'm not that unique. We're a whole lot more alike than we ever thought. We're all human. The very core of our faith is the idea that one human being sinned. Just one. And the whole world was affected by that sin. And then, much more joyfully, one human being was righteous. One human being was obedient. One human being was perfectly holy. And by his holiness, by his obedience, by his self-sacrifice, just one person, only one, that's all it took. Just one person, and the rest of the world could be saved. That's all it takes. That's how connected we are. That's what we need to see. That's the new sight that Jesus calls us to. If you go back, you've got time, because you're not going to work, you're not going to school. Sit down, open your Bible, give it a read, please. Read and see how Jesus over and over calls us to see the way in which we are connected with others. Every aspect of his moral teaching takes our attention off of ourselves and directs it to others, particularly the poor, the unwanted, the marginalized, the hated, and the weak. These are the ones that Jesus calls us to. He is insisting that we see clearly that our lives are interconnected. We're all in this together. And while it may be a bit of a ridiculous pun, maybe it can be the slogan for the rest of our year. Jesus calls us to new sight. Maybe that's what it means when we celebrate the date. Maybe this year we can see with 2020 vision.